My stepson Kyle kicked me out of my own home just days after burying his father, and laughed while doing it. He thought I'd fade into the wallpaper, that I'd shiver in silence while he played king of a stolen castle. But what he forgot, what they both forgot, is that I built this house with Howard, and Howard made sure it would never belong to anyone else, not even his own son. Howard's funeral was a quiet thing. No tears from his son, Kyle. No stories shared. Just a sharp black suit and a stiff nod when the pastor mentioned Howard's devoted wife. That was me. I'd worn navy. Howard always said it brought out my eyes. When we got home, the first thing I saw was Kyle, pacing through the living room with a yellow notepad, measuring tape hanging off his belt. He didn't even glance up when I walked in. I paused in the hallway. "What are you doing?" "Just figuring out a few things," he muttered, eyes on the walls. "This house has potential." That word settled heavy in my chest. Potential for what, exactly? I didn't press. Not then. I was tired. Raw. The house smelled like lilies and old grief, and the heels I wore had rubbed a raw line along my ankles. I poured myself some tea and retreated to the kitchen. That night, I overheard Macy, Kyle's fiancée, the one with 2 white teeth and a laugh that always felt about 3 seconds too late, say something that made me pause mid-step in the hallway. "We'll paint the study once the old lady clears out." The old lady. My hand tightened around the banister. I stepped into the doorway. "Excuse me?" Macy froze. Mascara-heavy lashes, blinking, like she hadn't meant to be heard. Kyle didn't flinch. He looked at me the way someone might look at a fly on their sandwich. "You'll need to move out soon," he said calmly. "This house isn't really yours anymore." My stomach dropped. "I'm your father's wife," I said, trying to keep the shake out of my voice. "We lived here for 28 years. Kyle raised an eyebrow. "You're not on the deed. You're a sentimental squatter, Darlene. Dad's gone now. This place is mine." My anger simmered. That night I lay awake, staring at the crack in the ceiling we never got around to fixing. Kyle's words echoed in my mind, hollow and sharp. Sentimental squatter. Was that all I was now? The next morning I found a bag of my clothes by the front door. Black trash bag sloppily tied. My framed photo of Howard teetered on top, glass cracked. He didn't even try to hide what he'd done. "I need the space," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Gonna turn your room into my home office." I stood there, hands still on the doorknob, stunned silent. "But I sleep there." He shrugged. "You'll figure it out." I pressed my lips together, swallowing rage like nails. That week, the internet went out. Then the heat. I called the utility company, service terminated by account holder. Of course, Kyle. When I asked, he gave a half smile. "Probably a billing error. You'll be fine." I started boiling water on a camp stove, layering up in coats, sleeping under 3 blankets with my teeth chattering. Macy walked past me once and wrinkled her nose. "You could at least keep your area tidy," she muttered. My area? This was my house. Then came the party. A week later, I woke to loud music, perfume, and the stink of cheap champagne. People I didn't know filled every room. My photo wall had been stripped bare, replaced with string lights and a banner, "Kyle and Macy forever." Not one soul acknowledged me. I came down to ask them to keep it down. I hadn't slept a full night since Howard died. Macy saw me and turned to the crowd. "Don't mind her. That's just the housekeeper." Laughter exploded around the room like fireworks. One guy even raised his glass to me. I turned away before they saw the heat rising in my face. I sat in my car for an hour that night, engine off, just breathing, staring at the house I'd called home for most of my life, the one Kyle now claimed as his own. They thought I'd crumble, that I'd go quietly, but they forgot who kept this house standing all these years. I started going through Howard's old files the next day. Just a whisper of a thought, really. I hadn't even known what I was looking for, but then I found it, tucked inside a dusty manila folder, marked contingency clause, deed of title, Whitaker family home. The edges were yellowed. The ink, faded, but still legible. Howard had added my name to the title in 1994. Not just that, he'd given me lifetime residence rights, ironclad, binding. With one caveat, I could live here as long as I didn't remarry. "Well, Howard," I whispered, "I kept my word. I never left, and I never loved again." I picked up the phone and called Rita Cole, My old friend from church. She used to be a paralegal before she retired. Sharp as a tack, Rita. Still kept a copy of Black's Law Dictionary on her coffee table. She came over the next morning, glasses perched low on her nose, and read every word of that contract like it was scripture. When she looked up, her expression was grave and gleeful. "Well," she said, setting the papers down, "looks like your stepson just tried to evict the wrong woman." And I smiled. It was the first real smile I'd managed in weeks. After finding that deed, I felt like I'd woken up after a long, ugly dream. The house wasn't Kyle's. It never had been. All this time, I'd been walking on eggshells, afraid to breathe too loudly, when the floorboards were mine. But I didn't let on. Not yet. I kept up the act, shuffled around quietly, took my cold showers, layered on sweaters like armor. I even gave Kyle a half-hearted "thank you" when he tossed me an old space heater and said, "Don't say I never did anything for you." Macy kept her smug little routine going too. "You should take up knitting," she said one evening, passing through the living room in her silk robe. "Might give you some purpose." I watched her saunter off, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. Purpose? Honey, I've outlived 2 recessions, 1 heart surgery, and 3 kinds of mildew in that old basement. I am purpose. But I let it go. I had bigger plans. The next day, I met with a real estate attorney. Young woman named Carla Beck. Smart, serious, the kind of woman who didn't bother pretending to like small talk. She reviewed the documents Rita and I found, nodded once, and said, "You're golden. If they push you, we'll push back harder." That's all I needed to hear. I signed the enforcement paperwork with a hand that didn't tremble once. When I left the office, the sky was the clearest I'd seen in months, blue as old china. At home, I slipped back into my role. Kyle was in the den playing video games, headphones on, mouth slack. Macy was on the phone, probably gossiping about me to some girl who'd marry a dentist and settle down in Phoenix. The day after that, I cleaned the house like I used to. Not for them, for me. That's when I found it. A silver picture frame shoved behind the coat closet. The one with the photo of Howard and me at the cabin, our first anniversary. He'd written on the back, in that crooked handwriting, "To my Darlene, the heart of this home." My eyes stung. I sat right down on the stairs and cried into my dish towel. But not for long. I had a letter to send. That evening, while Kyle and Macy giggled over takeout, I sent them a certified eviction notice. Formal, signed by Carla. 2 copies, one in the mailbox, one hand-delivered to Kyle's office. I slipped it right under the door with a little post-it. "Please read ASAP." 2 hours later, the shouting started. Kyle came stomping down the hallway, flinging open my bedroom door without knocking. His face was flushed, jaw tight. "What the hell is this?" I looked up from my crossword. "A letter. Eviction? Are you joking? You can't evict us from our house." I folded the newspaper slowly. "Kyle, it's not your house. Never was." He started to say something, but Macy came in behind him, holding the deed in her manicured fingers. Her face was pale. "She's on the title," she whispered. "She owns the house. It's real." Kyle turned on her. "You said she had no claim. You said she was just a tenant." "I didn't know," she snapped, panic rising. I stood. "You've got 5 days to leave," I said, calm as Sunday morning. "Or the sheriff will escort you." Kyle's mouth opened, then closed again. He tried to argue, threaten, said he'd call his own lawyer. "Please do," I said, handing him Carla's business card. "She's eager to chat." Macy backed away like the walls were closing in. I walked back to my room, slow and steady, and shut the door behind me. Then I laughed, quiet, relieved, a little bitter. The old lady cleared out, all right. Cleared out the trash. 3 days passed. Not a peep from Kyle. Oh, they were still in the house. But the laughter stopped. The perfume stopped. The loud TV marathons and midnight blender smoothies. All gone. The Whitaker house had gone silent, like a stage after the final curtain falls. I'd walk past Kyle's office door and hear whispers, tense voices, the rustling of paper. One night I even caught Macy crying in the bathroom. Door cracked, just enough for me to hear her say, "What if we don't find a place in time?" Kyle just muttered something about crashing at his buddy Trevor's and riding it out. riding it out, like they were the victims of some natural disaster and not the architects of their own downfall. Meanwhile, I made soup, the kind Howard liked, rich with barley and sweet with carrots. I polished the old hutch, wiped down the baseboards, took care of the house like it was a dear friend who'd been through something traumatic. Because, in a way, it had. On the fourth morning, I found Kyle in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, eyes bloodshot. He didn't look up when I walked in, just grunted and said, "This is elder abuse, you know. You can't just evict people like this." I stirred my coffee. "Oh, honey, you're 33. You're the elder now." He didn't like that, but he also didn't argue. Macy came in a few minutes later, dragging a half-packed suitcase and muttering under her breath about how this neighborhood isn't that great anyway. She reached into the cabinet for one of my mugs, my favorite one, the blue one with the chip in the handle, and I just tilted my head. "That one stays." She blinked, then dropped it like it burned. Good. I watched them slowly dismantle their fantasy, one box at a time. The framed engagement photo came down from the mantel. The extra monitor disappeared from the den. Their clothes vanished from the laundry line. Kyle looked smaller somehow. Deflated. The day before their deadline, Macy pulled me aside in the hallway. She looked tired, less done up. The fake lashes were gone, and so was the attitude. "I didn't know," she said quietly, "about the deed, about Howard's will. Kyle told me it was his house." I just nodded. "You believed him because it was easier." She swallowed hard. "I thought you hated me." "I did," I said, honest, "but not anymore." Her eyes widened. "I don't hate you now," I clarified. "I just don't care what happens to you." That landed. She stepped back, murmured a soft, "Thank you," and left me standing there with the ghost of Howard's cologne drifting out from the hall closet. Fifth day came like a drum roll. At 10 o'clock sharp, I made tea and waited. By noon, their car was loaded. 2 suitcases, a laundry basket, and a fake fiddle leaf fig. Kyle came in last, holding a shoebox and a deflated camping pillow. His eyes darted around the living room. He didn't say goodbye, just stood there a moment, like he might ask for something, one last mercy. But he didn't. He walked out without looking back. Macy followed. She paused at the door and whispered, "You're tougher than you look." I gave her a little smile. "You have no idea." The door shut behind them. I stood in the middle of my house, and listened to the silence. It sounded like peace. 2 days after they left, a thick white envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in Kyle's heavy-handed print. I didn't open it right away. Made myself finish breakfast first. 2 slices of rye toast with plum jam. 1 egg, tea still steeping. I ate slow, deliberate. I'd rushed too much in life. This wasn't one of those times. When I finally slit the envelope open, the smell of his cologne wafted out. He must have sprayed it on the letter. Typical Kyle, always trying to sell an image. There were 3 things inside. A note, scribbled in the margins of a gas station receipt, said, "Hope you're happy. You ruined everything." A key. One of the old spares I used to keep in the junk drawer, the one labeled Shed, and Macy's engagement ring. That last part stopped me cold. The ring was small, dainty, a cluster of cheap diamonds set in a yellow band trying real hard to pass for gold. I recognized it because I'd helped Kyle pick it out. He'd brought me along to the jeweler one rainy afternoon 2 years back, whining about his budget, about how it's the thought that counts. Back then, I thought he'd grown up. That maybe, just maybe, he had a little softness in him. Now I just stared at the ring in my palm and felt nothing. Not grief, not triumph, just relief. Later that night, I called Rita. She left him, I said simply. Rita let out a low whistle. Took her long enough. She left the ring in my mailbox. "Well, sweetheart, I'd say that's as good a refund as you're gonna get." We both laughed then. That kind of weary, belly-deep laugh that only comes when you've stared down hell and made it blink. Rita offered to come over the next day, said we should celebrate. I told her to bring wine. That night, I sat in my recliner with the deed framed on the wall above the mantel. I'd cleaned the glass, wiped down the edges. It looked proud up there. Deserved. The house felt different now. Lighter. I walked into the kitchen and opened every cabinet, just to hear the hinges squeak. I'd fix them later. The house was full of things to fix. Little things. The kind no one else ever noticed but me. In the hallway, I found the scuff mark Kyle made when he dragged my cedar chest out of the bedroom. He'd nicked the baseboard, left a black line like a bruise. I touched it gently, then grabbed a rag and started scrubbing. It didn't matter how deep it went. I would scrub until it was gone. The Tuesday after they left, I caught Mrs. Elkins staring from her porch. She was in her usual spot. Rocking chair, glass of sweet tea, that pink sun hat she wore like a crown. I waved politely. She didn't wave back. Didn't have to. The tilt of her head said plenty. By Wednesday, it was clear. The neighborhood knew. First came a surprise visit from Donnie Lane across the street. Said he just happened to be walking his dog at 9 a.m. without the dog. "You doing all right, Darlene?" he asked, eyes flicking toward the empty driveway. "I'm fine." Didn't expect Kyle to leave so sudden. Neither did he, I said, and shut the door gently. By Friday, 3 different neighbors had extra banana bread and conveniently needed to drop it off at my house. All 3 were wrapped in the exact same wax paper, and all 3 asked the same thing. So what really happened? I didn't tell them. Not the full story. Just smiled and said, "Turns out I still own the place." That shut most of them up real quick, but I could feel it. The quiet shift. Whispers in the grocery line. Half smiles at church. Not pity, not quite. Something closer to respect. People started seeing me as something. Not a relic, not a poor widow with one foot in the grave, but a woman who'd survived. And maybe even won. That Sunday, I went to the hardware store and bought a gallon of paint. Misty lavender, it said on the can. A soft, confident color. Just enough gray to say I'm done being overlooked. I started with the bedroom. That same room Kyle cleared out like I was some distant relative who'd overstayed her welcome. I moved slow, careful, took breaks, listened to old Motown on the radio. When I finished, I stood back and looked at the wall and felt like I'd made something right again. Fresh paint, fresh start. Later that week, I called a contractor about the basement. It had been half finished for years, just storage and cobwebs. But I had a new idea. I wanted to convert it. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, little kitchenette, clean and bright, with a private entrance. A rental unit, something that brought life into the house again. When I told Rita, she chuckled. "Well, now you're thinking like a landlord." "I've always been one," I said. "I just forgot to collect rent." We clinked wine glasses that evening and made a toast to reclaiming what was mine. But just as I started to feel settled, something dark slipped back through the cracks. It came in the form of a manila envelope taped to my front door. No name, just a single sheet inside. Typed. Cold. Legal language. Petition to reconsider ownership and financial misappropriation. Filed by Kyle Whitaker. He wasn't done after all. I didn't panic. Not at first. I set the envelope down on the kitchen table, made myself a cup of chamomile, and stared at the typed words under the yellow light of the old pendant lamp. That lamp had been flickering for years. Howard always said he'd fix it. He never did. Now it felt like it was warning me. Kyle's petition wasn't sloppy. No, it was strategic. He was claiming that Howard had altered the deed during a period of diminished mental capacity, which was just a fancy way of saying my husband hadn't known what he was signing back in 1994. It was a lie. But lies can look mighty persuasive when typed in 12-point Times New Roman on official stationery. There was more. Kyle alleged I had pressured Howard into signing over property he intended to pass to his, quote, biological heir. He even said I'd hidden the document from the family, as if I'd been plotting like some kind of black widow in an apron. I read it twice. My hands didn't shake, but my heart did. I picked up the phone and called Carla, my lawyer. "You get that envelope yet?" she asked before I even spoke. I exhaled. "You saw it too?" "Came through the clerk's office this morning. He's trying to scare you." "Is it working?" I asked. "Only if you let it," she said, crisp as ever. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. sharp." I barely slept that night. I kept replaying Howard's voice in my mind, how he used to tease Kyle for skipping work, how disappointed he'd been when Kyle pawned his college ring for beer money. Howard had loved him, sure, but he'd never trusted him, not with anything that mattered, and definitely not with the house. The next morning, Carla laid the documents out like cards on a poker table. He's bluffing, she said. But he's got a lawyer now. Some hotshot from downtown trying to make a name for himself. Can they overturn the deed? I asked. Carla tapped a thick file. Not unless they can prove fraud or coercion. Which they can't. But, she hesitated, he requested discovery. What's that mean? It means he wants access to old records, emails, bank statements, anything to poke holes in your story. It's legal fishing. I leaned back, arms crossed. Let him fish. I've got nothing to hide. But Carla's eyes were sharp. He's looking for one thing. A loophole. I hated that word. Loopholes were for cheaters, for people who didn't play fair. And Kyle had never played fair a day in his life. That afternoon, I pulled down every old box from the attic. Labeled bins, receipts, Howard's files, even his old wallet. I stayed up till 2 a.m., going through everything. That's when I found it. Tucked behind a stack of old tax records. A notarized letter from Howard, dated 6 months after the deed change. In it, he explained, in his own handwriting, why he'd added my name. To ensure my wife, Darlene Whitaker, remained secure in her home after my passing. My son has struggled financially and shown no interest in maintaining the property. It wasn't just sentimental. It was legal gold. Signed, witnessed, stamped. I stared at it under the kitchen light and felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. Howard had known. All along. He wasn't just protecting me. He was preparing for this very moment. I took that letter to Carla first thing the next morning. Didn't even bother with makeup. Just combed my hair back, put on a clean blouse, and marched into her office like I meant business. She held the letter gently, reading it with slow, deliberate care. Her brow furrowed, then smoothed. She looked up, a grin twitching at the corners of her mouth. Well, well, well. Mr. Whitaker left us a little parting gift. I felt the knot in my chest loosen for the first time in days. So it helps? I asked. Carla leaned back in her chair. More than helps. This isn't just a letter. It's contemporaneous documentation, a clear statement of intent. And that witness signature? Ironclad. We'll submit it in our response. I nodded, fingers tightening around my purse strap. Good, I said softly. Good. But I wasn't naive. Not anymore. Kyle might have been lazy, but he wasn't stupid. If he had a young, hungry lawyer on his side, they'd try everything. Throw spaghetti at the wall and see what stuck. I'd seen enough courtroom dramas to know how these things played out. Anyone can be made to look guilty if the lighting's bad enough. Carla saw it too. He'll try to rattle you, she warned. Expect a deposition request soon. I left her office with copies of the letter in a thick folder clutched to my chest like a shield. Back at home, I changed the locks. Cost me $300 and an afternoon of small talk with a wiry locksmith named Vince who smelled like leather and coffee grounds. He didn't ask questions, just got to work. When he handed me the new keys, he nodded once and said, "Good fences make good neighbors." I locked the door behind him and exhaled. This was my fortress now. A week later, a certified letter arrived. Kyle's attorney was requesting a sit-down deposition, one-on-one, on camera, under oath. I had 5 days to prepare. Rita came by that evening, with pie and sharp eyes. "You ready for this?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I'm showing up anyway." She smiled. "That's all you need to do." I spent the next few nights rehearsing answers with Carla. We sat in her office, long after the sun had set, until I could say every important date, every fact about the house, every dollar I'd ever spent on it, without blinking. "This isn't just a property," she told me once. "It's a life. You lived it. He just passed through." And the truth was, I had lived it. I was the one who painted the porch every spring, who kept the pipes from freezing during that blizzard in '08, who clipped roses from the backyard bush Howard planted on our 10th anniversary. Kyle didn't know this house. He just wanted to own it. The morning of the deposition, I woke up before the alarm. I made a fresh pot of coffee, stood in front of the mirror and stared myself down. "Don't flinch," I whispered. "Not this time." Then I put on my best blazer, the navy one with the brass buttons, and headed downtown. The deposition room was colder than I expected. Steel chairs, big windows with shades drawn tight, a camera perched on a tripod like a buzzard waiting for someone to bleed. Kyle was already there when I walked in. He looked smaller. No hoodie this time, just a wrinkled shirt, untucked, eyes sunken. His lawyer, some slick-haired boy in a too-tight suit, leaned in close and whispered something to him. Kyle didn't look up. Carla led me to my seat across the table. She squeezed my arm, just once, and then we got started. First came the easy questions. Name, age, relation to the deceased. Then the not-so-easy ones. Mrs. Whitaker, Kyle's lawyer said, his voice syrupy with condescension. Can you explain why Mr. Whitaker would leave you the right to this home, but not mention it in his will? I didn't flinch. Howard believed in privacy. The deed was amended years before his health declined. The house was mine to live in, always. He just didn't see the point in repeating himself. He smiled like he'd caught me. But you didn't inform the rest of the family, correct? Correct, I said. Because I didn't think I had to defend my marriage every Thanksgiving. Kyle shifted in his seat. His lawyer kept going. Isn't it true that you and Howard had a strained relationship in his later years? No, I said evenly. But Kyle did. Carla gave a little nod. Good. They tried to rattle me for over an hour. Asked about medical records, questioned Howard's state of mind, even brought up old emails. But nothing stuck. Then they called a break, and that's when Kyle finally looked up. You think you've won, don't you? He said, low and bitter. I stared at him. Really stared. For the first time in years, I saw not a man, but a boy. A scared, angry little boy still waiting for someone to hand him the world. I didn't win, I said softly. I just stopped losing. He scoffed. This house should have been mine. You never earned it. His mouth twisted like I'd slapped him. I stood, smoothing the front of my blazer. You don't build a home by blood, I said. You build it by staying when it's hard, by fixing what breaks, by loving what's yours. You never learned that. The camera clicked back on. Break was over. And this time, the questions weren't for me. They turned to Kyle. He squirmed, flubbed dates, got visibly irritated when asked about his job history, or lack of it. When asked why he thought he was entitled to full ownership, he mumbled, "Because I'm his son," like that was the trump card. It wasn't. By the end of the day, even his own lawyer looked tired of him. As we packed up, Carla leaned close and whispered, "We just won this thing, Darlene. He doesn't know it yet, but the judge will." Outside, the air was warm for once. The kind of golden spring afternoon that makes you believe in fresh starts. We walked past Kyle in the lobby. He didn't say a word, just sat there on the bench, staring at his shoes, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorry for him. 2 weeks passed. The hearing was set. Carla said it was routine now, just a formality before the judge signed off. The letter from Howard, the title records, the witness statement from Rita. They'd painted a picture so clear even Kyle's high-dollar lawyer couldn't blur the edges. Still, I didn't exhale. Not fully. I knew Kyle, knew him better than his own fiancé ever had. He wasn't done until he'd broken something. I just didn't expect that something to be my front door. It happened the Friday before the hearing. I was in the kitchen, pulling cornbread from the oven, when I heard the bang. Not a knock, a slam, like someone kicking the wood with everything they had. I froze, oven mitts still on, heart in my throat. Another bang. I walked to the foyer, slow, careful, and peered through the peephole. Kyle. His eyes were wild, red, like he hadn't slept in days. He slammed his palm against the door again and shouted, "Open up!" I didn't move. He pounded harder. "You think you can just erase me? Pretend I don't exist? I grew up in this house, Darlene." I still didn't move. "You're just some woman he married," he roared. "Some damn housewife who got lucky. This place should have been mine." I watched, silent. Then his voice dropped into something quieter, more dangerous. "If you don't open this door, I swear to God." But he didn't get to finish. Because that's when the siren lit up behind him. Blue and red flashed across the porch windows. Kyle turned, startled. Too late. A police cruiser rolled up the drive, smooth as glass. I hadn't called them that day, no, but I had filed a formal request for a patrol check with Officer Ramsey a week ago, just in case, and just in time. The officer stepped out, calm but firm. Kyle tried to bluster. "This is my house," but the officer raised a hand. "Sir, you've been legally removed from this property. You're trespassing." Kyle turned, eyes blazing, and glared right at the door. At me. "You think you've won," he hissed. And then he was gone. Escorted to his car, told never to return. I stood in the hallway long after the engine faded down the block. The cornbread had gone cold in the kitchen. My tea had steeped too long. But I didn't care. Because I knew this was the end of it. Later that night, I pulled down the old security chain and replaced it with a fresh deadbolt. Sleek, sturdy. One of those smart lock ones you can control from your phone. New lock. New rules. The next morning, I sat on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sun come up over the oak trees. Rita called just after 9. "Judge signed it," she said. "It's done. You won." I didn't cheer, didn't cry. Just sat back in my chair, looked out over the yard I'd tended for nearly 3 decades, and whispered, "I know." The final court date came and went like a thunderstorm, loud, a little messy, but over before noon. I didn't even have to speak. Carla handled it all with that cool fire she was known for, pointing out the deed, Howard's notarized letter, my utility records, even the receipts I'd kept for every repair since 1995. Kyle's lawyer tried a last-ditch argument. Intent doesn't always equal legal transfer or some such nonsense, but the judge shut it down before Carla could even stand. "I've reviewed the evidence," he said, dry as old toast. "The deed stands. Mrs. Whitaker's lifetime residence is protected. Case dismissed." Just like that. Kyle didn't look at me as we left the courtroom. He just stared straight ahead, fists clenched, jaw tight. I wasn't looking at him either. I was watching Macy. She'd shown up late, slipping into the back row. She had a new haircut, shorter and darker, and sat like someone trying not to be seen. But when the judge ruled, she stood, walked right out without a word. Not toward Kyle, away from him. I think that was the real ruling that day. That afternoon, I stopped by Rita's for lunch. She had tomato soup bubbling on the stove and a loaf of sourdough still warm from the oven. "To victory," she said, raising her spoon like a glass. "To finally sleeping through the night," I replied. We ate in the sunroom, light pouring through the windows like forgiveness. "I should be happy," I told her, staring out at the wind chimes, dancing on her porch. "But I don't feel happy. Just empty," she nodded. "That's normal, hon. Grief's funny like that. Doesn't just come when folks die. Comes when dreams do too." I blinked at that. She was right, because part of me had always held on to the tiniest hope that Kyle might come around. That one day he'd remember me as something more than a doormat with a driver's license. But hope can rot just like fruit. And I'd finally thrown the spoiled part away. Back home, I sat on the porch with a fresh glass of lemonade and watched as a blue jay chased a squirrel off the railing. The mailbox clicked. I stood and walked down the path, still gravelly underfoot, pulled out a single, stiff envelope. Certified mail. Return address, Carla Beck, attorney at law. Inside, a fresh copy of the deed, updated, sealed, and stamped by the county clerk's office. My name. Only mine. For the first time in decades, the house was truly mine. Not a shared asset. Not a gift in question. Mine. I framed that page in a glass case and hung it in the front hallway, right where the portrait of Kyle and Howard used to be. Funny how a house feels different once you're not defending it anymore. The silence stops sounding like judgment and starts sounding like peace. A month after the final hearing, I finished the basement renovation. What used to be a dusty maze of old paint cans and spiderwebs now had clean white walls, a small but tidy kitchenette, and a sliding barn door that opened to a cozy little bedroom. I even added a walk-in shower with those grab bars, Rita's idea, for when we get creaky. I listed it on the local rental site. Nothing fancy. Just private garden-level unit in a quiet, well-kept home. Utilities included. Long-term preferred. I didn't expect much, but 3 days later, I met Lena. She was in her early 40s, maybe, with a kind face and a quiet way about her. Wore simple clothes and carried a binder full of paperwork, references, pay stubs, even a thank you note from her last landlord. "I'm divorced," she said. "Not ashamed, just honest. My daughter just left for college. I'm trying to downsize and start fresh. Your ad felt safe." That word landed deep. Safe. I showed her the space, and when we got to the back patio, she smiled and said, "I could plant marigolds here, maybe." That's when I knew. "You're welcome to," I said, and handed her the keys before she even asked about the rent. From that moment on, the house stopped being just mine. It became something else. Lived in. Warm. Whole. We kept to ourselves mostly, but every so often, I'd come home to a fresh loaf of banana bread on the porch, or she'd find a little bouquet from my rosebush by her door. It wasn't friendship. Not exactly. But it was something gentle. And God knows, I needed gentle. But the neighborhood? Well, the neighborhood had other ideas. 2 weeks after Lena moved in, I got a visit from Lorraine Elkins, hat in hand, literally, and a casserole in tow. I just wanted to say, she began, we all, well, some of us, misjudged the situation. Which situation? I asked, not letting her off easy. She blushed. The whole eviction thing. And Kyle. We didn't know he was being so cruel, I offered. She winced. Let's just say, you handled it with class. I nodded slowly. Took the casserole. Thank you, Lorraine. She looked relieved. It's tuna noodle. Family recipe. I'm sure it is. After she left, I dropped it off at Lena's door with a sticky note. Don't blame me if it's awful. Blame Lorraine. She texted me later. Burn the top. Still edible. Good. Revenge food. I laughed harder than I had in months. Spring turned to summer. The roses bloomed bold and red along the fence line, just like they always did when Howard was alive. I trimmed them every Saturday morning, careful not to cut too much, careful to leave just enough wild. Lena's marigolds thrived under the kitchen window. Every time I passed them, I smiled. One quiet Thursday, I finally did something I'd been meaning to do for 20 years. I bought a wind chime. Not a cheap one. Not those hollow plastic tubes that clang like a factory. No, this one was real, hand-forged copper and aged wood, tuned so every gust of air sounded like an old hymn. I hung it on the front porch. That same evening, I got a text. Unknown number. Just 5 words. Nice chime. You miss him? I stared at the screen, pulse skipping. It had to be Kyle. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The next day, I painted the porch rails, scrubbed every board, oil sealed the swing chain. I wasn't doing it for show. I was doing it for me. Let him drive by. Let him see. This house isn't haunted. It's healed. A week later, Lena came upstairs with 2 glasses of iced tea and a manila folder in her hands. Someone left this in the mailbox, she said. No stamp. No return address. Inside? A letter from Macy. I sat down and read it slow, my fingers tightening on the edges with every line. Darlene, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I was wrong. About you. About everything. Kyle told me the house was his. That you were being difficult. That he was just trying to move forward. I believed him because it was easier than seeing the truth. I've spent months trying to rebuild my life, and not a day goes by that I don't regret the way I treated you. You didn't just survive him, you outsmarted him. And you did it with dignity. If there's ever a day you feel like talking, I'd like to apologize in person. No pressure. Macy. I read it twice, then set it down and stared out the window. Lena didn't speak, just handed me the glass of tea. I don't know, I said finally. I don't know if I want to hear it. You don't have to, she replied. Closure's a myth. Peace doesn't always need an audience. That night, the wind chime sang low and sweet. I stood out there under the porch light, a hand resting on the column, and closed my eyes. Do I miss Howard? Of course, but what I'd realized, what Kyle would never understand, is that you don't hold on to people by clinging to the walls they once lived in. You hold on to them by living better inside those walls. I didn't answer Macy's letter right away. I tucked it into the drawer where I keep Howard's watch and a dried corsage from a wedding we danced at years ago. Some memories don't ask for judgment. They just ask for room. But the world has a funny way of circling back when it's ready. 3 weeks later, I found Macy standing at the edge of my driveway. It was a Sunday. I'd just come in from weeding the garden, gloves tucked into my back pocket, hands still dirt-streaked. She wore jeans and a plain blouse. No glitter, no attitude. Her hair pulled back in a loose bun. Not a trace of makeup. She looked like someone trying to blend into a world she never quite fit. I didn't mean to just show up, she said quickly. I've driven past a few times, but today I just stopped. I crossed my arms, said nothing. I'm not here for Kyle, she added. We haven't spoken in months. Still, I waited. I moved back in with my sister, she said. Working retail, taking some online classes, trying to, I don't know, do something real. A long pause settled between us, hot and humming with cicadas. Then she looked me dead in the eye. I wanted to say it to your face. What I did in this house. The things I said to you. I'm ashamed. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I let him turn me into someone I didn't even recognize. I saw you boiling water on a camping stove, and I still laughed. I laughed, Arlene. Who does that? I looked down at my hands, at the dirt caked beneath my fingernails, the callus where the garden shears rubbed. Young people who've never had to beg for heat, I said quietly. That's who. She nodded. I brought something, she said, holding out a small, square box. I didn't move to take it. It's not much, she continued. Just a token. You can throw it away. But I needed to offer something. I finally reached for it. Inside was the engagement ring. Again. But this time, it wasn't about guilt. I want you to sell it, she said. Or melt it. Or toss it in the compost for all I care. It came from a lie. It shouldn't be carried into anyone else's life. I held it for a moment. Then I walked over to the old metal bird bath by the roses and dropped it in with a clink. Macy flinched. But I didn't. You don't owe me more than what you just said, I told her. But I don't forget easy, Macy. I don't forgive just because someone cries on my lawn. I understand. She turned to leave, paused at the garden gate. But I'm trying. I really am. I watched her walk down the street, past the row of old oaks Howard planted, until she was just a shadow between driveways. That night, I sat on the porch with Rita and Lena, the three of us sipping iced tea and eating pie from paper plates. She showed up, I said. Macy. Rita raised a brow. You let her live? Barely, Lena grinned. Did she bring a ring? Second time's the charm, I said. And for the first time, we all laughed. Really laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because I was still standing. Because the house was still standing. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge is living well inside the life they thought they could tear down. The summer eased into August like honey on warm toast. Slow, golden, a little sticky in the best way. The wind chime tinkled every morning like a bell of reminder. You're still here. You made it. I'd started a new routine. Coffee on the porch by 6:30. Deadhead the roses by 7. Then a walk around the block with Lena if she wasn't working an early shift. We didn't talk about the past. Didn't need to. But that didn't mean the past was done with me. One warm Tuesday, a letter came. Official looking. Cream envelope. Stamped in blue. Whitaker Estate reconciliation notice. I read it standing right there at the mailbox, sunbaking the crown of my head. Turns out, Kyle had filed a motion to access Howard's remaining bank assets. What little was left in a dormant joint account neither of us had touched since 2011. Maybe a few thousand, give or take. But in the fine print, I found something else. A letter Howard had written to the bank. Instructions to convert the account into a survivor benefit, payable to me only. Not Kyle, not even jointly, solely in my name. The account had sat there untouched, gathering just enough interest to matter, $7,412.83. Kyle hadn't even known it existed until now. And now? He couldn't touch a cent. I walked back inside, laughing to myself. Not out of spite, though I'll admit, it tasted sweet, but out of awe. Howard had thought of everything, even when he didn't say much. That evening, I pulled out a shoebox from the closet, my old memory box. Inside were cards, photos, a faded menu from our first dinner out. Tucked in the bottom corner was a note in Howard's uneven scrawl. If they come for what's yours, stand your ground, and if they come again, tell them they should have stayed home. I taped that note above the kitchen sink. It's still there now. The next day, I called the bank and closed the account, transferred every last cent into my home improvement fund. I didn't tell Kyle. Didn't need to. Instead, I bought a new porch swing, cedar, with thick cushions, room for 2. Not because I expected company, but because some part of me still believed in the comfort of having enough room. For your memories, your future, your feet up after a long day. The house was quiet now. but not empty. And me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Kyle. Not even at Macy. I wasn't naive either. I just knew who I was. Darlene Whitaker. 62. Widow. Homeowner. Survivor. And the woman who kicked her stepson out without raising her voice above a whisper. The porch gets the softest light around 5 in the evening. That's when the sun slants just right through the old oaks, casting gold stripes across the steps and making the railing glow like something blessed. I used to sit there with Howard, back when we didn't know how short forever was. Now I sit there alone. But not lonely. I keep the deed framed on the hallway wall, just inside the front door. Folks don't always notice it right away, but when they do, they understand. That frame isn't for show. It's for memory, for protection, for proof. That piece of paper cost me more than money. It cost me comfort, sleep, half my dignity. But I earned every line on it. Lena moved out last week, got a new job across the state, and hugged me hard before she left. She left behind a painted rock in the garden, just one word on it: home. I placed it beside Howard's rose bush, right at the base, where the roots run deep. The rental's empty now, but I'm not in any rush to fill it. I like the quiet. Like hearing my own footsteps on the stairs. Like making pancakes at 2 a.m. just because. The wind chime still sings every morning. Sometimes I swear it sounds like Howard chuckling, like he's proud of me. Macy hasn't come back. She did send a card, though. Just a small note on thick paper. You didn't have to listen, but you did. Thank you for that. Macy. I tucked it behind the deed. As for Kyle, last I heard, he was living with an old college buddy and working a customer service job. No fiancé, no house, no inheritance, and no apology. But that's all right. Some folks only come into your life to teach you what not to accept twice. The neighbors have stopped whispering now. Mrs. Elkins even brings her grandkids by to pick roses, and Donnie Lane asked me how I kept the porch plants so alive in this heat. I told him the truth. Neglect kills things. Care doesn't. And maybe that's the heart of it, really. Care. That's what built this house. Not bricks or paint or insulation, but care. Mine. I rebuilt everything that boy tried to tear down. Layer by layer. Board by board. Not because I needed to prove anything to the world, but because I needed to prove it to myself. That I could survive loss. That I could outlive betrayal. That I could start again, even at 62, with nothing but grit, grief, and a half-withered rosebush. And now? Now I thrive. I added a garden bench beneath the dogwood, started composting, joined a book club full of retired teachers, and one very opinionated librarian named Tessa. Sometimes I write letters to Howard in a little notebook, just to keep my thoughts honest. I sign them all the same way. Darlene, homeowner. That's how the story ends, my friend. Not with revenge, not with rage, but with roots. And a woman sitting on a porch swing, sipping tea from a blue-chipped mug, listening to a wind chime that sounds like peace. Because in the end, the lesson was simple. Never erase someone who held the pen. They just might write you out next. Now tell me, darlin', would you have kicked Kyle out? Or kept him under your roof to teach him a longer lesson?